Hi, everybody. My name is Michaela Beyer, and today I'm going to be interviewing Richard Duguay. Richard Duguay is known primarily for the fact that he appeared on the Spaghetti Incident, Guns N' Roses' third album, playing on a track called You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory by Johnny Thunders. However, he was also in Low Life and Personality Crisis, which were seminal bands in the Winnipeg punk scene. And now he's embarked on a solo career, releasing several critically acclaimed albums, and he's currently working on new music. And he also co-owns Runout Groove Records, and we're going to talk about that later. Thank you so much for coming on, Richard.
Oh, thank you. It's great.
Good. Alrighty, so let's start from the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
Born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is like the Midwest of Canada, I guess.
Nice. And what was it like
Yeah.
growing up there?
What was it like? It was the 60s, so, no social media, no cell phones, no, just growing up in a, medium-sized city, I guess. It was like 400,000 people or something back then. You know, go to school, play sports, until later, till I actually discovered punk rock in 76, 77, and that kind of changed everything.
Nice. So you hadn't really been musical as a little kid, but once you discovered punk, that's when you realized the fact that you had a love and also a talent for it.
Well, I don't know about the talent, but I had the love for it for sure. I had wanted to play guitar earlier when I was like 13, 14, and my dad was not going to have any of it, but he thought this guy he played on baseball team with was sold lessons for this music store in Winnipeg. So he had the guy come over to do an aptitude test, a musical aptitude test. And I thought, great, a guitar. He comes over and he has an accordion. So he was, trying to get me to see what kind of musical aptitude I may have had, and I failed miserably. And so that was it for a couple of years until punk rock. And punk rock, to me, it gave me the permission to be not very good and to learn in public, and that's what we did. And when you're especially back then, this would be like 77, 70, yeah, probably 77. We knew we couldn't play, but it didn't matter. It was just we had a punk band, and we got better, practiced, changed lineups, and eventually came to what is on the Low Life single, which came out in 79, I believe. So that, that was the first attainable dream, was to put out a 45, just like all our favorite English bands and New York bands and LA bands at that point. And so once that happened, then it just kept changing. The goals kept changing, getting bigger, doing a record or an album, etc., traveling, touring and stuff. So, in Winnipeg, you either played hockey or you played music. It was kind of about the only two options for me anyway. And I couldn't play hockey, so.
Well, one thing that I'm curious about is why you chose to stay in Winnipeg rather than going to Los Angeles or New York or London to join the punk scene there.
Oh God, that was not even there was not a one thought towards that. It's like we were just some crappy punk rock band from Winnipeg, and it's like, you know, that really never was ever brought up, or I don't think even talked about, because it was like, you just don't do that. We only had us. Well, the band had actually broken up by the time the 45 came out. So,
Right.
Yeah, it just wasn't a thought back then. It's like we couldn't play bars because we were too young. So we played, ethnic halls in Winnipeg. We'd rent them and put on shows and stuff. It was great. It was kind of zero expectation of, you know, success, whatever that may be. You know, it was just about playing in a band and having fun. And the fact that we actually got as far as we did in terms of musicianship, and then the single when it came out was like pretty mind blowing to a kid who started with nothing. So,
Yeah.
probably a fairly typical thing for kids back then who got into punk rock early. I mean, it was like, yeah, let's do a 45. And, you know, and as we got better, there's a demo that nobody seems to have of some of the songs that were on the first single, or the only single. And they are horrible. Like, they're charming because, these kids playing is the best that they can play, which really wasn't very good, to like 6 or 8 months later when we recorded the single, because we rehearsed a lot. And, you know, we actually, the Low Life singles, I was talking about it last night with a friend of mine, Mike Price, who was over he lives in Vancouver, but he was over. And, he was talking about his band, Genetic Control, who did a single, I believe, in '84 in Montreal. And, he seemed to be not super proud of it, or, whereas for me, the Low Life single was like, it was a hell of an achievement for a kid who failed an aptitude test, a couple of years earlier. And, that's the thing, the whole punk rock thing, when people say, which has become a popular thing, is that the Sex Pistols were a boy band. And, I don't know, I wasn't there, but their attitude and the Damned and stuff, it was like, you can be in a band and be terrible and learn as you go. Whereas prior to that, it wasn't really something that anybody, at least that I know, did. They rehearsed in basements in Winnipeg, and if they got lucky enough, they'd play the bar scene doing covers. So I've thought about it much in the last few years, in that where I am now and when I started, which was a long time ago. If it hadn't been for punk rock, who knows? It's like, I wouldn't be here, that's for sure. I would probably be still in Winnipeg working some crappy job for little money and maybe being happy. Who knows? But that's not the way it turned out, obviously.
Hey, it turned out pretty well. And I know what you mean. Punk rock really gave people the permission and the ability to be expressive musically without having to be a virtuoso, which I think is great.
Absolutely. And, it's, to me, that was everything. It's like something that, not to make too dramatic, but it's like something that I had been looking for my whole life. And all of a sudden, his doors were open and we could do anything we wanted, and it didn't matter. We didn't care if people loved us or whatever. I mean, you always want people to like you, but, we were just doing what we did, and it was great. It was fun. It was a fun period of my life.
Good. And the Low Life single still holds up. I really enjoyed listening to it, particularly Think Naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so long ago for me, but I hear it occasionally here and there and whatever. And yeah, I think it still sounds pretty, doesn't sound dated really,
Mm-mm.
so I mean, what more could you ask for out of a record,
Exactly. Now, tell me about leaving Low Life and being asked to join Personality Crisis.
Well, that came out of Personality Crisis, came out of a Winnipeg band called La Kill, who were primarily they did a lot of acid, and they were great. They weren't, musically maybe not the greatest band, but they were great. And then their singer quit, or the drummer quit, I think. So my friend Mark, who was in Low Life, the drummer, he started playing with them. And then they did a week at this bar in Winnipeg. This has got to be 1980, I guess. And after halfway through the week, the singer said he didn't want to do it anymore. So he finished the week. And then the bass player, Mitch, who was the singer in Personality Crisis, decided he wanted to get off bass and just be the singer. So I took over the bass. And there was Mark on drums, Mitch singing, me on bass, and two guitar players, Walter Cott and Tom Wharton.
Mm-hmm.
And when I joined, and well, when Mark joined and then I joined, the whole chemistry of the band changed, as it does when you change members.
Mm-hmm.
And Walter was a great guitar player, so he wasn't an issue. But Tom, and he's a great cat, and we hung out and had a lot of fun. But he wasn't what we needed at that point anymore. So there was that painful sort of, sorry, dude, but you're out of the band. And brought in Jimmy Green, who had played in this other band in Winnipeg called The Photos and Torn and Frayed, I believe. And he was like he was like Joe Perry, pretty much. He was like a really great guitar player, and he looked great and moved great and stuff. So all of a sudden, we had this completely different band than what La Kill had been. Mm-hmm. So we had to change the name. And we did 3 nights with the Romantics way back maybe that was, by then it might have been 81.
That's right.
In January, when it's like 50 degrees below zero in the prairies, Midwest thing. And we had this bus, this old 50s school bus that had been owned by these twins called the Walsh twins, who were both Elvis impersonators. Huh. And that was their gig. And they, by all accounts, did great and stuff. But anyway, we bought the bus. We didn't know shit about anything. So we get in the bus to go on this mini tour, Winnipeg, Regina, Saskatoon. There's no heat on the bus in the middle of winter. So that was, welcome to being on the road, where if things can go wrong, they will at some point. And then the bus wouldn't start and blah, blah, blah. So I guess prior to that, maybe I booked some shows in Minneapolis at 7th Street Entry, which was, kind of the CBGBs of the Midwest or something like that. And they said, well, what's your name? And I said, well, I've always been a huge Dolls, Thunders fan. And he's like, oh, we're going to call it LAMF. And the promoter or the booker at the club says, Johnny Thunders just played here last month under the LAMF thing. So I was like, okay, that ain't going to work. So we went back and was like, okay, how about Personality Crisis? And people were like, everybody in the band was like, yeah, cool, great. And of course, we were nothing like the New York Dolls. It was rock and roll, but it was fast, and it was different, just a whole different thing.
Yeah, it was a lot less glam than the New York Dolls.
Yeah, I mean, there are photos where we did really get glammed up, etc. Because we had long, Jimmy had long hair, I had long hair. So it wasn't. We didn't look punk rock, so to speak, but there was definitely the Dolls influence and stuff. So we played Minneapolis and did good and stuff. And then I guess we did the Romantics tour or something like that. And that was, it was kind of a whole different ballpark than playing the ethnic clubs just in Winnipeg.
Yeah, exactly.
But by that time, bars had opened up in Winnipeg to original bands to some degree. So all of a sudden we're playing bars, 7 nights, 6 nights a week, or 3 nights a week, and we rehearsed often. And then you know, the personality crisis story is long, and so I mean, it might be easier if you just ask, because this could take hours if I just keep rambling about what happened. So
No, it's totally okay. That was a great way of telling about it. One thing that I am curious about though is how you handled the tours. I mean, as you've just admitted, they were pretty gritty, and you were actually hospitalized a couple of times. When that happened, did you have any doubts about whether or not you wanted the lifestyle of being a touring musician?
well, when you're an alcoholic and a drug addict, it's kind of, as long as those things are available, you're fine. It's when they're not available. So yeah, but this would be 84 that you're talking about. The last tour. Yeah, I wasn't well. I mean, I didn't live anywhere. I lived on couches, didn't eat much, drank way too much, did drugs whenever possible. And I was, in 84, I would have been 22 at this point.
Hmm.
As my friend John Armstrong from this amazing band, the Modernettes, he said, "Congratulations, it took me to my 30s to destroy my body like you did by 22." And I was like, yeah, I guess that's not really a great thing, is it? But what can you do? So yeah, I went to the hospital of Seattle, I think, and then Salt Lake City, and then Chicago. And by the time I got to Chicago, I just couldn't. I was dying. I was just so fucked up and just sick, and my body was breaking down and stuff. Yeah, and it sucked. I immediately, because back then we had no tour management, we had no record label. We did have a record label, but they didn't do anything for us except put out this record, the Creatures for a While record. So we would we drove from like Salt Lake City to Minneapolis, which the label had set this show up back at 7th Street Entry.
Hmm.
We get there and we call the club. They're like, "No, you're not playing here today. Somebody called like a week ago, but we told them there was no show." So which was so typical of how we did things back then. Just, you know, five drunks, five alcoholics in a van trying to accomplish this stuff. We could have used help at that point. So we had a band vote whether to, because Winnipeg is directly north, basically, of Minneapolis. Sorry,
Hmm.
that or go to Milwaukee, I think. And I was super sick, but I didn't want to get the band off the road. So
Hmm.
of course the vote ended up 2 for going on, 2 for going home, and I was like, fuck. So I said, let's just keep going, even though it would have been wiser, but I didn't want to desert them, because that was my life.
Yeah.
So we went to Milwaukee and played a show, stayed there like 4 or 5 days because we didn't have a show till the next weekend. So then we went to Chicago, and
Where I'm from, by the way.
oh, really? Okay, I thought you're south for some reason.
Well, I kind of grew up halfway in both, but I was born in the Chicago area.
Nice. I hope to get there soon. It's been a long time. So we get to Chicago and we play a show, and it's great. We're staying with this band Articles of Faith, who are our friends. And I was so sick, and I couldn't sleep anymore because I was all fucked up, and I just had to go home.
Hmm.
So, and it was the worst feeling because I was immediately an outsider in the band, even because we were still there for a few days.
Yeah.
So I would be lying in bed or whatever, not sleeping, freaking out, feeling like total shit, and I could hear them talking shit about me. And it was like, fair enough. They didn't believe me when I said I was that sick. And, I get it. Everybody was fucked up and whatever. So I went home and they did maybe 4 or 5 more shows. And then there was one last show in Winnipeg, which I wasn't invited to play on, which understandable. I left the band and that was it, until like 6 or 7 years ago when we did a reunion show in Winnipeg, which was crazy good.
How was it crazy?
Well, people had been, because a lot of old punk rock bands were playing, reuniting and playing and stuff. And
Mhm.
we were like, nah, Mitch, the singer, didn't want to tarnish our reputation. That his quote. And I was like, what reputation? We were drunks and drug addicts who happened to be a great band. But so eventually, this friend of ours, Patrick, um, was going to put out the record had never been put out on CD.
That's right. It was only
And
vinyl.
yes, multiple times on vinyl by multiple dubious, not all of them, a couple of dubious labels, but whatever. So I was thinking, I was like, if there ever was a time, and we're all getting older and blah, blah, blah. It's like, wouldn't it be cool to do like the CD launch release with a gig in Winnipeg? So it took me a few months to talk to everybody and to kind of get, especially Mitch, the singer, on board with it. And, we had everybody who had been in Personality Crisis. I wanted to do like the early stuff and then a different section and then what would be called, I guess, the classic lineup that did the record, the album.
Right.
And, but anyway, so we agreed to do it. And I called this friend of mine, Dave McKagan in Winnipeg, who has a club that holds about 500 people packed. It's a fair sized club.
Mhm.
And I wanted to keep the prices cheap, or
Yeah.
low. He says, like, what do you want to charge? 35, $40. And I was like, no, but let's just do $20, So anyway, it's all cool. He put them out for sale and they sold out within, a day basically. So it was like, oh, and so we could have done multiple shows, but it was kind of just a one thing, and that was going to be it, which was fine. It would have been cool to do more because there was the demand for it. So when we played, I mean, if there was probably 700 people in this place that legally maybe holds 500 tops. So it was jammed, and it was, I kind of, in a way, I needed, not to be too much psychobabble or something, but I needed to, and I'm not a big fan of the word, but I guess it's apt, closure, because I left the band because I was sick and they did their thing and then they broke up. And I kind of felt like it was maybe my chance to prove that I could still do it.
Uh-huh.
And I worked really hard to, not that I had to relearn them so much. I mean, parts of them, but just to do it really well and be proud,
Yeah.
proud
And
of everybody. Sorry.
it had been a while too. I mean, there are a lot of
Well,
songs on that record. It makes sense to relearn them.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I wasn't going to half-ass it. It was like definitely going to. So, the Jimmy Green, who was the original Personality Crisis, other guitar player, okay, I wasn't going to tell this, but so anyway, I had gotten everybody plane tickets from Vancouver to Winnipeg, Calgary to Winnipeg, me to Winnipeg. We were
Yeah.
going to get there like 3 days early to rehearse as a band for 3 days. And, if everybody did their homework, it would be a piece of cake. But, you can't, it's hard to create, or not create, but have the same energy you did when you were 22, when you're late 50s at the time. But,
Yeah.
it was going to be what it was going to be. So everybody's there, and we're going to go pick up Jim, who's coming in from Vancouver. He and Jimmy has had his issues over the years. Unfortunately, he still apparently does. But he was game, and had been talking to him like every day about the songs and about how great it's going to be. And so he misses the first flight, and we called him, and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, oh, I didn't have the money to pay to put my guitar in luggage or whatever, in baggage. I went, well, why didn't you call us? We would have, sent them. We would have paid for it. Oh, okay. He goes, so we found another flight for him the next morning or early afternoon. And so we had started rehearsing without him. And he was like the lead guitar player for the most part back then. He was way, way, way better than me. So next day comes, and he doesn't make the plane. So we call him, and he lives in what's called the West End of Vancouver, which is like one of the most highly populated per square mile or whatever it is in North America or something. It's a busy part of town.
Yeah.
He said, I couldn't get a cab. So we're like, really? And Jimmy has been known to make, reality is an alternate universe for him, let's say. So we're like, okay. I said, okay, we'll try this one more time tomorrow. We booked you on like a 3:00 flight or something, which would have been our second of 3 days of rehearsal. So in the meantime, we had gotten somebody else because it was looking kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
So the third day, the promoter, Patrick, who was doing the CD, his aunt worked in a travel agency or something, so she could get info that we couldn't get. She goes, oh yeah, he checked in at 1:30. Okay, great. I guess he's coming. We had paid his freight, paid his guitar thing and everything, baggage, whatever. So around 3:30, the flight had left, and Patrick had called his aunt. It did, just making sure he's on board. She said, no, he checked himself out and is not on the plane. It was like, okay, well, fuck him. We had this other guy. So but the show itself was, it was just the love and stuff. And we played pretty good, all things considered. I thought we played really good, actually. And it was, it was kind of like a victory thing of, okay, now, for me anyway, I can put it to bed that we did this thing. And as much as I wanted to do it for everybody, because it was such like it was just, it was the first time we had ever made any money, really, from, because when we toured, if we got $100 a show, that was good, because we had no label that was backing us really. And self book tours such as they were and stuff. So it was kind of nice, not kind of nice. It was, I was proud of everybody, and I proved to myself, I guess, that I could do all that. I had to take over a bunch of Jimmy's parts because he wasn't there, and this other guy had just learned the songs, and he was great,
Mhm.
Jason. Um, so yeah, that was a pretty, the door closed on that. I mean, we did get a ton of offers for a whole bunch of money, and yeah, Mitch, and I don't disagree with him. He's like, let's just leave it as it is. That's a good way to go out and have it, you know, the back cover of the book closes, and you go to the next thing. So it was great. It
Yeah.
was, pretty, yeah, just like, I guess I was outside on the patio having a cigarette, and I had said we'll be on in say 15. So I went, and I guess everybody got on stage and was waiting for me. And I could hear over the PA, like, would you come to the stage, please? And I was like, ah, fuck. So I had to walk through this because the dressing room was at the opposite end of the stage. So I had to walk through it was such a weird feeling, it was like kind of Spinal Tap in a way, but everybody was so happy and so excited about it that it was, things like that don't happen very often, or at least, in that kind of way, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to go out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a way to go out, you know.
There's a quote in my head, it's better to burn out than to fade away.
Well, my take on that quote is we burned bright, we burned hard, and then we burnt out, or something like that, you know. And that's what we did, there's a lot of people, excuse me, um, who said that live, we didn't capture how we were live on the record. And I mean, you know music, and bands, and it's like a lot of bands say that. It's like they you can't capture that, and because playing in front of 300 people who are all just fucking loving it, you feed off of that as a performer, artist.
Uh-huh.
It makes you, it's this whole thing that kind of happens, this chemistry thing, whatever it's called.
Exactly. And sometimes it just doesn't land the same way in a record as it does live.
Well, because in the studio, you're playing to no one. You're
Mhm.
not getting, the only feedback you're getting is, yeah, you fucked up this part. We got to do it again, or whatever. Or that was great. Let's move on. So there's no feedback. There's no, I don't know. It's just it's a different thing, It's a
And
whole different thing. And
and I mean, do you agree with that judgment? Do you think that Creatures for a while didn't quite capture uh your your gifts as performers?
I don't know. I never saw us play.
Okay.
You know, it's it's weird, when that thing that happens between an audience and a band and stuff, you can feel it, but you can't see the band like from on stage. You can't see the band. You can't, it's that's something for other people to decide and whatever. I mean, the record was great. We didn't have any time to do it. We did it in two different periods, I think, for sure. You know, we got into the studio late at night, and somebody called in a favor, or we got cheap time, and you have to do X amount in this period of time. So you don't have a lot of time to really do anything except get them down as quickly as you can, as best you can. So, which, that's how all punk rock records were made. It's not like Aerosmith would go in and spend $1 million and take a year and a half to write their record in the studio, which is great. That's cool. But we were well rehearsed. We used to rehearse pretty much 5, 6 days a week for like 4 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's how we got so good, you know? I mean, that I don't think I'm being arrogant about it, is, you know, and we all came from rock and roll, rock backgrounds. So, you know, and every band is different and, you know, have at it. We all came from like 70s hard rock stuff,
Yeah.
which is very evident in the songs,
Mhm.
except we played a lot faster. Um, the singing was different, you know. It just could be an acquired taste. I mean, some people loved his singing, some people fucking hated it because it was so not what everybody else was doing, like screaming,
Yeah.
fuck Reagan, da da da, you know, all that stuff, which was going on in the 80s.
Mhm.
But musically, we, you know, which is sort of, I think, because we used to play, you know, we tour and there would be six bands on a bill, you know, playing community centers or whatever, you know, and God bless all the bands who are out doing it. But after a while, everybody seemed to be doing exactly the same thing. It's super, super fast, hardcore, singer screaming, and not all of them, of course, but I'm generalizing. And then we would come on. So there'd be, say, four or five of these bands, and we'd either headline or play close to the end. And we were so different from the other bands, even though we could play pretty much as fast as they, but we just had a different, you know, if your musical reference starts at, say, the Circle Jerks, just for to pick a name,
Mhm.
versus somebody whose musical thing goes back to the early to mid 70s, there's a totally different approach and style of music.
Yeah.
And because we were probably older than most of these younger bands, our references went further back and we had more, maybe more of a, I don't know, the further you go back in music, the more options you have, the more things you learn, you know, instead of, you know, a strip band, you know, where they get all their references was, say, from Aerosmith from the mid 70s, etc.
Mhm.
Well, Steven Tyler, this is like in 88, said, the interviewer was saying, you know, must feel great, all these bands name checking you and how big of an influence you are and stuff. He goes, yeah, it's great. I wish, he said, but I wish they would go back further down the line to the old blues artists that we listen to,
Uh-huh.
because it gives you more experience with how Aerosmith got there, for instance, you
Yeah.
know. So I always thought that was a wise quote. And so we were so different than every other band that whether we were better or not really isn't a part of it. But people remembered us because we were so different.
Exactly. Yeah. It
Yeah.
made you stand out.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't by design, it just happened, you know.
Yeah. And as for like scenes eventually imploding, I mean, that kind of happens to every form of music. Like music just evolves and people grow beyond the scene. So I don't really think it's the fault of any of the bands. I think it's just sort of how what eventually happens in every scene, whether it's the Sunset Strip or Winnipeg or New York.
Yep. You know, it's all cyclical,
Hmm.
you know. All of a sudden you have a 90s revival or an 80s revival going on. It's like, hang on, wait, I lived through that. I'm not old enough to have it come back through again. But,
You probably feel that way all the time now.
you know, you just got to be who you are and do what you want to do, especially nowadays with no record labels really, and there's no money. Nobody's buying CDs, records. I mean, there are people, but not enough to sustain a band, at least at my level.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
for me, like we were talking about, like how you see these revivals going on, I think a lot of it is adorable. And I mean, I see the kind of 80s and 90s revivals in fashion and music and in a lot of other ways. Like it's to me, there's a right way to do it and a cheesy way to do it, and I see a lot of both in those things.
Well, I mean, if you look back to say the 80s Sunset Strip thing, a lot of it was cheese. You
Hmm.
know, there was some, there's that saying that the cream always rises to the top, which maybe not exactly 100% true, but you've, it's one of the reasons why GNR became what they became, and other, another 1,000 bands on the strips never either got a deal or never sold any records, broke up or whatever, you know. And it's like Seattle, you know. I remember living here at certain points, but in the early 90s, I moved back down here and I hadn't been here in a couple of years or something like that. And prior, like in 88 and stuff, 87, 88, from Laurel Canyon all the way to Gazzari's, which would be almost San Vicente up on
Hmm.
Sunset. There was thousands of kids and bands and everybody partying, handing out flyers. It was just this, it's like, wow. Cut forward to like by 91, you could drive from Laurel Canyon up to San Vicente and there'd be nobody,
Yeah.
nobody. And a lot of those bands moved to LA for the strip thing, Sunset Strip music thing. And then because it was huge, and when they didn't make it in LA, then they moved to Seattle because that's where bands were getting signed, and that's where not realizing that by the time people figure that out, it's over already.
Hmm.
It's really, it's like I can't remember who I'm reading an article or an interview by, but 1967 in Haight Ashbury was the summer of love. That's what they
Uh-huh.
call it. People who were there were like, no, it was over by then. It was more like 65, 66. That it was, that's was the peak of it, I guess. And
Hmm.
it's, music is the same thing. It's somebody once asked me like my what I think my legacy would be. And to me, it's easy. And this ties into this question, maybe. I'll make it tell you. I think my legacy is being part of a group of thousands of musicians who built the road that other people drove in afterwards. Meaning, there was no kind of, punk rock it wasn't always like Nirvana, you know, those bands were not selling a million records. So you ate shit, you traveled, you did, slept in bathtubs, whatever. But somebody has to build those roads. Otherwise, you can't get metaphorical, possibly. But, to me, being part of anything that ended up where it did, it's pretty amazing to be part of a movement, even though nobody knows who I am. That's fine. That's cool. It's for me, it's almost always been about just the love of being able to play music and to write nowadays anyway. I mean, from a kid who failed, an accordion aptitude test to, you know, being able to tour, putting out records here and there. I mean, fuck, what more do you? Yes, would I have loved to have made enough money? Fuck, of course. I'm not an idiot. But at the same time, it's the reality of it. And if that's the only reason you're in it, to become rich and famous, you might be in the wrong world, you know. And I'm 62 and change now, and it's like, in my opinion, and I know everybody says this, and I get why they say it. It's like, I think I'm doing some of the best things that I've ever done musically now, and you know that's enough.
Yeah.
And it's just this weird, I got to live my dream, in most of the ways. And it's like, people like this stuff, great. If they don't, whatever. I just do what I want, and if I like it, that's good enough.
You might not be as famous as Elvis, but you're still part of something bigger.
Yeah, yeah, being a part of something that's bigger than myself, and that's something.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we've heard the story of personality crisis, and let's go back a little bit to a gentleman that you met on tour, Duff McKagan. I think that you met him when GNR was doing their first West Coast tour.
No, wrong.
Oh,
No, I actually met him when I was on tour with Personality Crisis in 1983. He was still living in Seattle.
oh, okay.
Yeah. We had played a show in Vancouver earlier that summer of '83, I believe, with the band out of Seattle called the Fastbacks.
Right, with Kim Warnick.
Yes, and Kim and Lulu and I became pretty good friends and stuff. And so when we went to Seattle to play a show, or on our way down to San Francisco or something, they introduced me to Duff, who had been, I don't think he was drumming in the Fastbacks at that point, but he had at some point.
Mhm.
And he was in the Farts and stuff, of course. Um, and we just hit it off right away. Like, it's just one of those things, like, which hasn't happened a ton in my life, but it's happened a few times where you meet somebody and you just know that you're going to be friends
Mhm.
forever,
Nice.
such as it is.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we were playing Olympia or Portland, I can't remember. So Duff and Kim and Lulu, I think they all came with us, and it was a house party, I think. And of course, we get to this gig house party, and it's a zoo. It's just crazy. And we're like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. The cops are going to fucking definitely shut this down. So I said to Duff, I'm like, let's go get a drink. So we found this local bar, and we ordered the same drink, a 7 and 7.
Mm.
So that was another, just these things. And we just shot the shit and then ended up driving back to Seattle, I think, because there was nothing going on. And then we just, one of the sweetest things he ever did, or, amongst many things. But so we were getting ready to leave. I think I was staying with him and Eddie, I think. So I was getting my shit, and somebody had given me this kind of short sleeve blue sparkly. It was cool. It was black with kind of blue sparkly things, whatever. And I gave it to him because he liked it.
Mhm.
And I have no idea how I came into possession of it. Somebody obviously gave it to me somewhere, and which was no big deal. So we leave, and I guess we got to Portland or San Francisco or something. And he had slipped $20 in my suitcase, which 20 bucks back then was, a fair amount of money, and for me, for sure.
Yeah.
And it was just like such a nice thing, it was just like, fuck. He was working at a bakery, I think, at the time, if I recall. And I just went, wow, what a fucking nice guy, thank you. I probably wrote him because back then, you wrote letters or
Yeah.
called. And yeah, and we just kept in contact and stuff like that over, the next few years.
Mhm.
And then one day I had flown back from Chicago and moved in at my dad's house for a while because it was all there was available, really. And I got better, somewhat better. I
Mhm.
was a carny for a couple of weeks at this fair that was in Winnipeg every year, making a bit of money. And I ended up not really moving in with this guy, but kind of moving, on the couch. There was a lot of cocaine, if I recall. Anyway, one day somebody calls his house, he answers, says, "Oh, it's for you." Okay. So I pick it up and it's Duff. He goes, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, getting fucked up, drinking, the usual thing. He goes, "You got to move down to LA and join this band." And I was like, I had just gotten off the road and, I had no money. And he goes, "Don't worry about it. I can get you a job selling toner," which was the big gig for unemployed musicians, was selling toner. And I was like, "Oh man, I just can't do it." I said, "I'm just not in the position to do it, blah, blah, blah." He's like, "Oh, okay, blah, blah, blah." And we just, we kept in touch and stuff like that. And he had moved to LA by that point, of course. And we just kept in touch. And, I remember him sending via the mail this package. And Lord, I'm sure I have it somewhere, but I've lost so much stuff over the years. It was a poster from them playing the Marquee right when Appetite came out.
Yeah.
It was cool as shit. Maybe I'll find it one day. And the Geffen advanced promo copy of the record, which was on cassette, and a Geffen sort of, welcome to Guns N' Roses, and it was, just a press thing. Mm-hmm. I put it on, and I was like, "Fuck, the music's great, singing, can't. I'm not behind it, other than the music is great." But I kept listening because he was my bro and stuff. And then one day it just clicked. It clicked to me. It all made sense. Mm-hmm. It's like, holy crap. And, I'd go to the supermarket and buy rock magazines and shit, which I had always done. And, lo and behold, there'd be like a page spread of this up and coming band out of Los Angeles. And I was like, man, that's just so cool,
Wow.
And the more I listened to it, I just had this feeling that they were going to be huge, because they, it wasn't like Motley Crue, a lot of the same references possibly, but just, Motley Crue has their moments, don't get me wrong, but the GNR thing seemed more just raw and ragged but great,
Aggressive and real.
Yeah, like absolutely real. And lots of melodies. Slash was obviously a great player, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. Which to me is the best thing he ever did, was Appetite.
Yeah.
That's regardless of that. And then I saw him in '87 when the record had just been released in Canada, like literally that week, and they were on tour with the Cult. And I was on tour in the West Coast doing some festival and plus some other shows in Vancouver. And it just so happened that we were going to be in Vancouver at the same time.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was great. So we were playing that night at this place called the Arts Club Theater. Mm-hmm. It was part of this festival. And so we were staying at some friend's house, and everybody except Axl came to hang out and drink and party and then go to the show. And Izzy and Slash and Steven, they didn't know me, obviously. They didn't know any of us. So they didn't trust us or something. So they took a taxi, but Duff came with us and blah, blah, blah. Did the show, and it was a drunken mess, but it was fun. And then we went back to their hotel, which was not in Vancouver downtown. because I guess they wanted to not have them close to things, so to speak.
Okay.
So we went, and me and my pal Yoda, who was in the band I was in, we went back to their hotel, and it was Slash and Duff were sharing a room,
Mhm.
a very modest room, I might add. So we were all just partying. I don't think there was any drugs, but we definitely were drinking a lot. And Slash was an asshole. It's hilarious. So Slash, opens up the window and starts throwing beer bottles at cars and shit. Just like, this is such a cliche, pal. But he was a prick to us, me and my friend Yoda. I think he was jealous or something that Duff was hanging with his pals, and he
Huh.
didn't know us and whatever. So I mean, Duff settled him down and everything was fine and shit. But then we saw them the next night. They were playing with the Cult at the arena, and oh, crap, they were so good. It was the best I ever saw them.
Really?
They were, because they were nothing. They were nobody, and they were hungry, and they were fucking great. They were just fucking great. And then he left and got married. I think after that show, I think he flew home and married Mandy, I believe.
Yes.
And
Who I have
somebody
interviewed.
else.
Wonderful.
I'm sorry.
Who I have interviewed. She is a wonderful lady.
Oh yeah, she's awesome. She is awesome. So then, yeah, we kept in touch and whatever. And then they were doing the Iron Maiden tour in '88, opening for Iron Maiden, which I thought was a strange bill.
Yeah, that tour was a little trippy, and they were kind of getting bigger than Iron Maiden, so that made things awkward, but whatever, it did the trick.
Yeah, I mean, back then, they weren't getting played on MTV really. So it was, just go out and tour with whoever. So we were hanging out, and Duff made the mistake of telling Slash I had just bought a guitar. And it was like a 1969 black, what do I call them? Black custom Les Paul, which was great.
Oh.
I had just got it like 2 days before. Slash spent the next 2 or 3 days just harassing me because he wanted it. Eventually I gave in, and it was a fair enough trade monetarily wise, but I regret that. But
Does he still have that guitar that you sold him?
I think so, because the last time I talked to Slash, well, not the last time, but he said he still had it.
Really?
It's been a while. Well, I think he's got lots of guitars. I'm
Well,
pretty sure.
no kidding, but still, I mean, I'm curious about that one. How long ago was that you asked him that?
But '88,
Oh, so it's been a while. Okay. Well, I
who
mean,
knows?
cease. But it sounds like you and Duff really had a good rapport and a continuing relationship.
Oh yeah,
I've met Duff a couple of times, and he seems like a total sweetheart, a great guy, and very talented and very proactive about what he wants. Whether it's music or studying finance. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, he was in pretty bad shape for periods, and when he finally got sober and got his shit together, it's like, yeah. I mean, he was never a dummy, but
Of course not. Like, and I understand that he had his struggles, which we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But still, I mean, I'm really happy for him, and
totally.
it's nice to see a success story out of something that could have been really tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. It was tragic at points, that's for sure. But yeah, no, he's a busy guy, got a lot of shit going on, and I haven't seen him in quite a while. But by all accounts, he's doing great, and he was always a fucking super great guy. You know,
Mhm.
uh, there were parts, like everybody who suffers from addiction or is in addiction, active addiction. it changes you, and it's not always a pretty change, but to be able to get out of that and turn your life around, it's like pretty admirable.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess you kind of already answered this a bit, but I was going to ask if you were still friends with Duff. I guess you've said though that you haven't seen him in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I I've been sober, he's sober. I mean, I've been sober a while, but I just don't want to bug him. I know he's busy.
Hmm.
And
Still, I mean, I think that if you met up by chance, I know that he goes to some events here now and then, but I'm sure he'd love to see you.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to be one of those people who, you know, whatever. Um, we'll meet each other. We'll see each other at some point, and I'm sure it'll be great. It's he went that way, I went that way, and it's all good. I have no resentments or anything about it. Just what
Of
can
course
you do?
not.
It's he's seems super happy, and he's got a lot going on, and well, good on you.
Exactly. And so let's go back a little bit. You've already talked about some of your adventures, but tell me what it was like getting a call from him and being asked to come on his solo tour.
Well, he didn't call me. It wasn't him. Um, it was Joey, who was the guitar player in the touring band, who I had been friends with for years. There was a band in LA that I played with in '92, I think, called Circle of Soul,
Uh-huh.
and we did an album for Hollywood Records, recorded at Capitol Records building, which was very cool. So that was the well, actually, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. How does this work?
Oh,
There's
cool.
that was the touring band for that.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't know where that came from, but so he called me, and we had been bros for you know, since Personality Crisis days. So he said, "Hey, you want to come down to LA and audition for Duff's solo tour?" And I was like, "Sure."
Hmm.
Strange that I would have to audition, but I guess that's fair enough. So they flew me down, and then I learned all the songs off the solo record, and It's So Easy and So Fine, I guess, off of Illusion, and
Hmm.
I guess, and rehearsed with the band for 2 weeks or something without him, Duff. And then he came down to, see if it was going to work or something, which I've always, I didn't care about auditioning. It's like, fuck, whatever. Worst case is I get a free little holiday to LA, all expenses paid.
Yeah.
Uh, and he was like, yeah, great. And I think we rehearsed for like 3 months, which is ridiculous considering we only learned about a dozen songs. Um, so in some ways we were over rehearsed and whatever. And then Duff joined us maybe 2 weeks before we went out. And it was great. It was like going from touring in vans and cars and sleeping in closets, floors, whatever, vans, to getting paid and expenses being taken care of, and it was it was pretty cool. It was not without its moments, of course, because that's what happens on the road, but yeah, it was great. It was, so playing in front of 40 or 50 people and then playing in front of 15,000 is kind of a shock to the system for a bit.
Yeah. I mean, what was that like? Was it dazzling or did you get used to it really quickly?
Well, we did. we did 3 warm-up shows in the US. Went to we played Oakland, and then the next night we played San Francisco, came back to LA, and then the next week we flew to New York to play the Ritz or Webster Hall, whatever it was called then. Um, and those weren't huge shows. Like the first two, San Francisco and Oakland, were club shows, which were good, well attended, but they weren't arenas,
Mhm.
And then Webster Hall was pretty big. I don't know if there was 5,000 people, 3,500. It was big. So that was great. I could handle that. And then we flew to Hamburg, and we were playing opening for the Scorpions.
That's right.
Yeah. And the first night, we did 2 nights in Hamburg, I think a Friday, Saturday or something. And the first night we get up there, it's playing, the whiskey, the redwood, the sugar, whatever. You go up and you do your thing, all of a sudden you're backstage, and it's like, okay, tour manager's like, okay, we're on in 5. Then they come and get you, and they lead you up these back stairs to the stage,
Uh-huh.
and your roadie tech guy hands you your instrument, and you're ready to go. And it's like, that was weird, because it's like, you know I can be on stage when I need to be, and I can, but that's not how it works at that level.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird, and whatever. And you get on stage and they introduce you, and you kick off with whatever song we were starting with. And you can't see to the end of the arena, but you can see a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the first couple show, I wasn't scared, because that is not true, but I wanted to be the best I could be. I was playing bass, so it's like lock in with the drummer, let the guitar players do whatever the hell the guitar players are going to do.
Mhm.
And I was kind of like Bill Wyman, just standing there making sure I played the right notes, lock in with the drummer, and let the singer and the guitar players do their thing.
Yeah.
So that went on for a few gigs, and who brought it up? The tour manager or Duff or somebody. They're like, you got to start moving around on stage. And I was like, I'm just locking into my bass parts, and like, no, no. And there was, maybe I'm misremembering, for like, if that's even a word. Uh, but like, it was kind of a condition of employment, that part, that you had to start moving around on stage. I was like, okay, fuck it, that's fine. So I started, because doing all whatever I was doing.
Mhm.
Everybody was happy, and we got to Scorpions were great, because they gave us full PA, full lights. We got to use the ramps, so you could go up and play Rockstar for 10 seconds and shit like that. And they treated us so well. It was great. And because Duff was in the biggest band in the world, we're staying in 5-star hotels everywhere,
Mhm.
and a tour bus, so it wasn't your normal opening band kind of scenario.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that, it was like, if you're going to see Europe for 3 months, it's not a bad way to do it. You're getting paid to go do it, and you're staying in the finest hotels. And it was weird, it changes you, because it's a way of life that nobody else has,
Mhm.
sort of. And it's not to be exclusive or something, or whatever it's called, but I stopped thinking for myself after a bit, because you get every night, 11 o'clock, you get the slip for whatever's going on the next day under the door.
Mhm.
Tells you where you got to be, what time you got to be, what time your luggage has to be done, what time sound check is, or what time interviews are, or the in stores. And then, like I said earlier, you get backstage and they tell you when you're going on. They put your instrument over you and you go and do your thing. And you don't have to think any. It was so weird. It got scary because it's like I couldn't. It was hard to make any decisions, sort of, because everything you're in a bubble,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
there's people who are making sure that you're always where you need to be, blah 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 blah, whatever it may be, stage interviews, whatever. So it's kind of weird how it changed me. And I'll cut to the end of the tour. When I flew home, I woke up the next day and my ex-wife, she went to work, and I sat on the couch for hours and I couldn't decide anything. It's like, what do I do? I should do this. But so, and it took me like an hour and a half to actually get up and go have a bath.
Yeah.
And it scared me because it's like, wow, this is not like real life where you wake up and you have this to do, that to do, and you do your things. And or even in a band, a smaller band where, okay, you go to rehearsal. This was like, you don't make any decisions for yourself. They make them for you because they need you to be here, there, everywhere. And they
Yeah.
make sure it was really like a culture, or something, kind of shock, where it was like, fuck, I've ceased to become a human being. I am now just this programmed thing. It was weird. But once I kind of figured out what it was, then it was fine, because this is a temporary thing. And you just got to be where you got to be when they want you to be there, and that's cool. It's fine. But there was a couple instances in Europe where we had a day off and we were going to play this club somewhere, just an unannounced gig. And the road crew, had the night off because, it was a day off. So we get down to this club and I couldn't figure out how to turn the bass amp on.
Ah,
I was like,
problem.
yeah, it was terrifying. It's like, what the fuck has happened to me? It's like, I've turned on a million amps in my life. Why am I like wondering yeah, it was just minor things, really, but kind of a glimpse into what it must be like to tour for years and years and years.
And to have everything taken care of for you. I mean, you had come from the punk rock scene where everything is DIY, you have to do everything for yourselves, and then touring with one of the most famous rockers in the world where everything is taken care of for him and for his entire band.
Yep. Yeah, it was an interesting thing, that's for damn sure. Yeah, not having to worry about anything, or do, it's like, it's so alien. It was so alien to me, because it's like, that's the, I can't imagine what it was like for them after 2.5 years of the Illusion tours.
Exactly. I mean,
It's like, holy crap, how do you function?
and how do you go from basically living in your car and living on the street to being the most famous musicians in the world within a 6-month period? I mean,
Yeah, well, it wrecked their band.
unfortunately, yeah. And I wish it hadn't, but there's always the music left over.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's, to go from, like you said, basically living in your car to being in the biggest band in the, because Appetite didn't get big till '88. So it
Exactly. It took
not
about a
like
year after it was
yeah.
released for it to really.
So, but there was somewhat of a rise, and then it just went crazy with Sweet Child. Um, yeah, I mean, I saw the difference in how things were. You know, it was
I mean,
like,
I'm glad it didn't wreck any of their lives. I mean, all 5 of them are really lucky to still be alive after everything
I
that they went through.
yeah, I mean, that's yeah, I mean, in a general sense, I'm amazed that there hasn't been more musician deaths, you know, given the proclivity of drugs, alcohol, destructive behaviors. Da, 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 da. I mean, there's a lot of people who did die, obviously, but the fact that there isn't way more is, I don't know if it's good luck or good genes or whatever it is, but yeah, the fact that we can all hope that they will reunite with the original band at some point, but
I mean, I want that. And I think that I also have a bit of a hyper awareness of musician mortality right now because it's the 30th anniversary of Kurt Cobain's death today. And, it's sucks that it turned out that way for him. But going back to what we were talking about, I'm so grateful that so many of you guys made it out alive, you know?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of those, it's weird. I mean, I wasn't the hugest Nirvana fan. Like I could appreciate them and stuff, but I remember where I was when they announced that he died. It was after the Duff tours and stuff, and I was going to work at this design place, and it came on the radio, and I was with the drummer for Duff's, the drummer who was on tour with him and me, and we were just like, "Oh, that's fucked up."
Yeah.
But given his addiction, his pretty public addiction,
Mhm.
yeah, I could, I never met him, had no idea about anything, but it's like he couldn't deal in theory or supposedly with who they had become, and I'm sure there's a lot of other issues. It's like, why didn't you just move to Montana? You know, buy a ranch and whatever. If being a rock star of that that huge, how huge they got. I mean, if it's not for you, there are options. But I'm just,
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of factors at work in him, and
yes,
I don't assume that I know the exact reasons why he would kill himself, but I just feel awful that he did that.
yeah.
I am still a huge Nirvana fan, and I'm so sad that they didn't get to go further and that he didn't get to have the life I think he deserved. But I guess the
I have grown to really respect, and I mean, if I don't ever hear "Smells Like Teen Spirit" again, I'd be okay. But a lot of, I mean, it's so overplayed still. But the rest of this, I mean, I can appreciate it. I get why it was huge, but you know, I, all that Seattle stuff, it took me till most of the bands had broken up before I actually, or maybe not so, but it was after how huge grunge was for sure, like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and stuff. It's like, God, there's just some killer stuff in that. Not all of it for me, but there's some, when I was kicking dope one time, which was the biggest habit I'd ever quit, I would listen to like Alice in Chains, like Rain When I Die, and just dark, dark stuff. But it kind of, I don't know, it helped, you
yeah,
know.
I mean, and I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that. Sometimes it's good to, I mean, music is the language of emotion, and hearing your own emotions reflected back to you in that way was probably therapeutic, you know?
I remember like I didn't sleep for like 12 days,
My
and
goodness.
all night. It was like, I don't know if it was like June or something, so it wasn't super hot here. I would just stay outside every night and just listen. I didn't have an iPod or whatever they're called. I had some other thing similar, and I would just play songs over and over, and I'd just be weeping. It was such a weird thing, and it just felt, because the dope was leaving my body, and I was, um, I didn't feel very good for a bunch of it. That's for damn sure. But just that. how the music actually really got me through it, you know. I remember, like, you know, days into it, and I'd just stay outside all night long and have a blanket, and then I'd take it off because I was freezing, blah blah blah, aching, and I'd make sure I walked around the block a couple nights or a couple times a night just to use my legs and stuff. And I remember listening to music and whatever, and waiting for the sun, metaphorical or something, but waiting for the sun to rise that I survived another day. And it was weird how, you could went from like black, dark sky to dark blue, and slowly the sun would come up, and that's when I knew I was going to be okay. It was it was one of the most incredibly painful times, but also like a reawakening of of me. Uh, yeah, it was interesting.
Wow. I'm I didn't actually know you had had that struggle, but I'm very glad that you made it through.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. Tell me about recording You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory. From what I understand, it was originally meant for the Duff solo album, but then it got used for the spaghetti incident.
Correct. I was living in West Hollywood, and I get a call 7 o'clock at night. Duff's like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Nothing, just hanging." He goes, "Do you know how to play You Can't Put Your Arms in Memory?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to come down and play guitar on it?" I'm like, "Sure." So I take a cab down to Conway. I think it was Conway recording on Melrose or something. And it's this big, expensive studio and stuff. And, you know, there was alcohol, drugs, the usual things. I mean, there was nobody there, I don't think. It was just Jim Mitchell who was producing it and engineering it, Duff and I think that was it. So they play me the track and playing along. And
Mhm.
for a lot of stuff on his solo record, Duff wanted to play he's was and continues to be a huge Prince fan.
Yes.
And I think that was his concept, was that he was going to play everything on this record. Um, but and he started with the drums and built it up from the drums. His timing, because he wasn't using a click track or something, the pauses when it stopped and started, which happens a few times in the songs, weren't in time, let's say. Instead of you stop, 2 3 4, start again, these were like they were out of time, so he just did it by feel. But it took quite a while to get those parts done, because I couldn't count it. I just had to, like, kind of, and this was on tape, so this was before, like Pro Tools and stuff.
Yeah, I mean now it would be such an easy fix. It's
Oh,
almost too easy of a fix now, really.
well, yeah. I mean, for something that's a weird, there's no real time signature to those things. Yes, it would be much easier. You just hit the chord, chop it, move it there, and move on. So it took a while. And at one point he goes, "I thought you said you knew this song." And I just looked at him. I went, "Well, if you'd have played it properly, we'd be done by now." And he was kind of like, "Fuck you." And I was like, "Yeah, well, fuck you too. This is what it is." And the engineer, Jim, who I knew somewhat, he was like, "It's all good. We'll get it." And yeah, and it was great. It was, a really cool experience. And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's going to be in my solo album." I'm like, "Great." And then he calls me one day. He goes, yeah, that song's not going to be on my solo album. I'm like, okay, why? He goes, well, Axel heard it and he's demanding basically that it goes on the Spaghetti Incident. So I kind of went, okay, great, you know. Uh, yeah, and it's this weird, I'm proud of it. It was great. The experience was great and everything. One day I got this package in the mail and it was a platinum record.
Yeah.
And I kind of went, hmm, but I've never put it up in my life
Why not?
because I'm grateful for it. I'm super grateful for it. And because I didn't want it to be that moment in my life. Like that was my peak or something. It's just something that happened and it's great and it's cool and all that. I mean, I'm not saying it's not sitting up right there right now, but I personally have never put it up.
Okay.
Um, it just
So you're
it doesn't
on.
it, it
Sorry, go
doesn't
ahead.
define who I am or what I do, and I get it that people want to talk about it, and stuff. I mean, I understand it. There was a time where I wouldn't, but um, it's all good. I mean, how many people have a platinum record on their wall, and it's, it was with a great friend and everything else, and but I didn't want to be that person who is constantly resharing it for, and I get why people do it. That's cool. That's their thing. That's fine. But I just didn't want to be that guy. It's like, yeah, it's just one of many things I've done in my life, and it's cool.
Yeah.
But I get the fascination with it and all that stuff for sure.
Mhm. Alrighty. So, after the Duff tour happened, tell me what occurred in the aftermath of that. I mean, the tour ended because apparently Duff got a little bit too ill.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't very well in Europe. I mean, he had just come off basically a 2.5 year tour with GNR. Was drinking a lot. Um,
10 bottles of wine a day, from what he says in his book.
did he say 10? Yeah, well, when we started the European part of it with the Scorpions in '93, he said, hey, I quit drinking. And I'm like, cool. He goes, yeah, I only drink wine now. And I went, okay. This is long before either of us had probably ever heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, but um, I'm like, okay. And he didn't look well. Um, yeah, he was drinking a lot.
Mm.
10 bottles a day would be a fair guess, I suppose. But when we went to Japan in early '94, he had lost some weight, hadn't been drinking it. He looked much better. He was playing better. He was singing. Like the Japan part of the tour was probably because we were headlining, so we could play however long we wanted, and we were stretching out as a band where we'd been doing this long enough that so then we did whatever 6 7 dates in Japan, flew back to LA, then we were supposed to go to Australia, then after Australia we were supposed to tour the US with Iggy, which would have been pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah. No
So
kidding.
the day before we are going to Australia, everyone's got their bags packed and they're ready to go the next morning. We get a phone call, or I got a phone call. don't pack your bags. I'm like, well, it's a bit late for that. And he goes, well, we're canceling the Australian tour because Duff is sick.
Aw.
Um, yeah, it sucked, but I also understood that he probably needed to get better, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that was right before his pancreas burst, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was a good year plus, I think, before that, but he was definitely heading in that direction for sure. Um, yeah, and that was kind of, I saw him sporadically after his second wife, Linda. I think she kind of turned him against his old friends.
What?
Just,
Really?
just my opinion. Excuse me. Yeah, and whatever it took for him to get better, and then sober and change his life, I'm all good with. It's not about me; it's about him. Um, but yeah, I got that feeling that she wanted to cut out. You know, they moved to Seattle.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I mean, so it was kind of sporadic after all that stuff. Um,
I mean, Richard, I was going to say I really know next to nothing about Linda. I have never met her. I don't even know if she's still alive. Like, so I can't really.
oh no, I'm not saying what I meant by all that is that was my take on it, because all of a sudden there was no communication from him. He wouldn't return calls. And it was the same with other people trying to get a hold of him just for whatever reason. So that was or maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe it was his way of trying to clean his life up. I don't know. I've never talked to him about that. And it's none of my business why he did what he did, because he did it because he wanted to get better. And however that transpired that's great. Um, So yeah, there I was stuck in LA, or here I was, I guess, stuck in LA with a work permit and no gig. So, you know, it was an interesting time. Um,
And I understand that shortly after that, you actually had a health challenge as well. You had a brain aneurysm at one point. Is that correct?
yeah, that was down the road a bit. Me and my ex-wife stayed in LA till 95, maybe 96. I don't remember. Moved back up to Canada, to Vancouver, and got a job, bought a house, um, you know, figured it was time to live the normal life.
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm a carpenter and stuff, so I redid the house and, blah, 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 did a whole bunch of work on it. The day, the night I finished doing the house, I had turned the attic into like 2 bedrooms and a bathroom.
Oh,
And in this house, the stairs going up were super steep because they weren't meant as a stairway to a living quarters.
yeah.
So we finished everything, went to bed. My ex-wife woke me up, took her a while. She had fallen down the stairs, as it turned out, and just crushed her wrist and all that stuff. So
Ugh.
went to emergency and got her taken care of, and she was going into surgery and stuff. And I said, well, I'll come back and grab you or come and see you, whatever, but I got to go back and deal with, we had a dog, a couple cats. So I went back and slept for an hour or two, took the dog out, fed everybody, was going to have a shower and then go pick her up or whatever it was. And That's when all of a sudden the world just went like this, and then I woke up some point later. It's a lot more involved, and it's kind of a hilarious story at parts, but I'll keep it brief. I woke up and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I got there, wherever that was, and I had before cell phones. There was like cordless phones, I guess they were called, which
Mhm.
I had in the bathroom in case my wife called or whatever. And somebody happened to call me who was a friend of mine, and I told them I need to go to the hospital. So fast forward, a while, they found out that I had an aneurysm that burst in my right frontal lobe.
My
So
goodness.
yeah, that was kind of life changing. Had emergency brain surgery, and was lucky enough to survive that too. But it did change my life. I mean, I couldn't work anymore because I had what they call what do they call 'em? Brain deficits, which is a polite term for brain damage, of course.
Oh,
Um, so I ended up going to this brain injury clinic for 2 years. Do like speech, language, a whole bunch of stuff, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. And I still have my moments, but for the most part, I couldn't read for a long time. I couldn't watch movies or TV because I just couldn't focus and stuff. And eventually, I still have my moments with things and stuff, but for the most part, you know, hell, just happy to be here.
yeah. So it sounds like you recovered, but it was a pretty long road.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it was interesting because the night that my ex-wife fell down the stairs and then I had the aneurysm and shit, um, we had been talking about having a kid.
Oh,
Yeah. And then, 4 hours later, all hell breaks loose and life is never the same. And, we ended up splitting up what are we in, 2024? Yeah. A few years later, it kind of just all went south, you know, partially because of my thing, but also partially because of whatever her thing was.
yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you do, right?
I mean, tough moment, but you still overcame it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta. I mean, it took years where you know, but life goes on. You got to keep moving somewhere, somehow. And I was lucky enough after me and her split up to. I took up golf.
Really?
I had golfed when played all the sports and shit when I was younger, and golfed and stuff, but I hadn't golfed in forever. And I was living at my brother's place, living on his kitchen floor. And I was collecting my disability every month and stuff. And it's just, he was a golfer. So we ended up golfing all the time. And then I golfed more, and it was good, but I was strung out like hugely at the time. But yeah. And then from that golf, I ended up coming down to LA to play golf with some friends who were from Winnipeg originally too. And that's how I ended up meeting my wife, Paula.
That's right. You met her
So
here.
it's people's reaction is, "You golf?" It's like, yes, I did golf.
Do you
And
still golf?
what's that?
Do you still golf at all?
I haven't golfed I mean, mini golf and stuff with the kid, but I I still have my clubs and everything, but it just, you know, It changes when you have a kid. You don't have nearly as much free time as you did prior to that. And,
That's right.
you
Now,
know,
tell me a little bit about becoming a father. I mean, what a big step, especially after the kind of life that you lived before.
yeah. Um, yeah. It everything's great until it actually happens, and then the reality, and not that it wasn't great, but I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do. As somebody said at that point, it's like nobody's ever really ready to have a kid. It just happens, and you learn as you go.
Mhm.
And that's pretty much what it is and was. It's there's so many different, I don't know what the word is, stages, I guess, because you're a newborn and you're this, and it keeps changing. Every 6 months it's something else. But it was and is. It's probably the greatest thing I've ever accomplished. Is you know my kid may say otherwise, but I kind of doubt it. A good father. You know, I am everything, or at least no, no. Let me rephrase that. I try to be everything that my parents weren't.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, your mother actually left the family at one point, so you grew up with a single father for the most part.
right. Yeah, my mom left, I think, when I was 9, something like that. Yeah, I mean, and getting sober really helped me in that sense of, you know, were they good parents? All I can say, and I accepted it and everything, was that they did the best they could with what they had. And, you know, that's got to be enough sometimes. I didn't want our daughter to grow up the way I did or had to.
Mhm.
Uh, it wasn't always horrible, but, you know, it was a different world in the 70s than it is now, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
you wanted to give her a better life.
you know, to the point of going completely the other, you know, instead of getting some things that every kid has or wants, she pretty much gets everything she wants. And she started driving a couple weeks ago.
Whoa.
Like she's 15 and a half, so she can't get her driver's license till she's 16, but she's done her beginners and is taking driving lessons, and we drive all the time and stuff. So it's she told me the other day that she wants a Bentley. So I guess I gotta make some money so I can buy my kid a Bentley on her 16th birthday.
That might have been a joke.
Oh no, she was totally serious, but things that are just never gonna happen. But
Yeah,
it's
that's
good
one
to
of
have
Robert Downey
dreams and
Jr.'s
goals.
force. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
It's good to have dreams and goals.
Yeah. So is she musical at all? Like, do you guys jam together?
Um, we wrote a song together. Um, I'll send it to you. It's on
Yeah,
YouTube.
send it to me.
It's on YouTube. It's this is years ago. She was probably 9, 8, 9. I don't remember. She has this song called Cotton Candy. So I wrote this kind of a pop song, but guitars and stuff, some synthesizers, and she wrote the lyrics and the melody. And we wrote the song, and my friend R.D. Kane was down here. He lives in Vancouver, and he does videos, and an amazing photographer and video guy. He did a video for the song. It's fucking cool. She is so embarrassed by it now. Like she just doesn't want anybody to know about it, of course. And I ask her once in a while, I'm like, hey, do you ever want to write a song or record? I mean, I'm in the studio,
Mm.
She just says no. She took piano for fuck a bunch of years, but hated every second of it.
Mm.
So, she's gonna do what she's gonna do, right? She'll figure it out.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a happy situation. I mean, you strike me as very much a survivor, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just life. It's yeah. I mean, fuck. I can't really, I could complain about a lot of things, but I really can't complain about anything, honestly. Life is, you know, someone said to me, like, you need to write a book. And it's like, no, I could never write. Not that there's not enough interesting things, but just life hasn't always been on the up and up.
Mhm.
So, and it's like, what's important to me is that I'm not that way anymore. This is a whole different, and I'm 62 and change and been sober a fair amount of time. And, you know, I mean, I couldn't have imagined this life when I was 16 picking up a bass guitar, you know. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine still doing it in my 60s. And, yeah, wow, it's amazing. It's a gift.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's talk about your solo albums a little bit. You've recently released Bad Juju and Beautiful Decline. I really love how Bad Juju is basically a concept album. I mean, what inspired you to make it?
I got really bored of writing writing songs in popular or standard arrangements, I guess.
Hmm.
Intro, verse, chorus, solo, outro, or whatever it is. And I just decided that, it's not like a whole bunch of people are fucking awaiting the next offering that I can come up with. And I was like, fuck it. I'm just gonna do whatever the hell I want to do. And it just kind of ended up like that. It was, I mean, it's obviously very Love It to Death, Killer, Alice Cooper inspired, sort of.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it just kind of ended up this wacky, where nothing was too left field for it to go in there. So it took a long time to write. Me and my writing partner for that album, mostly, Mark Floyd, who lives up in Vancouver. You know, Coming up with these weird little bridges between completely different musical parts and stuff, which is like almost more Pretties for You. No, not Pretties for You. Easy Action, the one before Alice Cooper broke with 18, where there was all these wacky parts that somehow were strung together and it all makes sense. I mean, mine wasn't as adventurous as that, but for me, it was pretty out there. And it was, a really, I don't know if therapeutic is really the right word, but it just satisfied me in a way that, I mean, I pretty much played everything on that record except for bits here and there. I guess maybe tying it back in with Duff when he did his solo record where he wanted to play everything, where it's like, I didn't have to rely on anybody to show up and play this, that, or the other thing. I could do it all pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, the same mentality went into Beautiful Decline. different sound, sort of similar but different.
Mhm.
Um, and the new record is different than those two. So it's, I can do whatever the hell I want and do it for me. And whether people buy it, like it or not, fuck, it ain't gonna change my life. And that's fine. You know, it's like I have no expectation that it would be great if a bunch of people liked it, bought it, whatever. But the reality of the industry, such as it is, it's not about that anymore. And for me, hasn't been for a long time. So it's just I just want to make cool records, with and beautiful Decline and Juju. I mean, we really worked. Paula, my wife, and my daughter came up with the makeup for the bad juju
Oh,
thing.
cool.
Um, she was on set when we were doing the videos and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, to me that those two records for sure, they're kind of like art projects,
Mhm.
you know, where there's sort of a concept, there's a visual concept, and then there's the videos that portray and hopefully tie all that together.
Yeah.
Um, I don't see too many other people doing shit like that. And people do whatever they want. I really wanted to just make it something that wasn't standard or maybe not standard, but just the same thing.
Exactly. And I love that you veered into more of a concept album. I mean, not many bands are doing that right now, particularly in the LA scene. So I thought it looked really unique and different. I mean, I loved both of those records. Absolutely loved them and the videos that went with them.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, they cost us a whole bunch of money that we didn't have, but you know, we had to do it had to be those things.
Hmm.
And, you know, talk about legacies and this and that. I mean, um, yeah, we accomplished what we set out to do, and it wasn't always easy, but ultimately, it's like, and the new record is completely a whole different thing too. It's just sort of more back to straight ahead sort of rock and roll stuff. Um, Yeah, and I actually, for the first time in a long time, I actually that we have a band, like a full band, and that has changed how I work. Um, my stomach is doing weird things. Um, you know, recording because the last two records, they just start with the songs start with an idea, and I have no idea where they're going, how they're going. I just write drum parts, the bass, the guitars, vocal, whatever.
Yeah.
And it just kind of becomes whatever it becomes. Whereas the new record will be, the songs are finished, we rehearsed them,
Hmm.
we recorded them, and I'm in the last stages of mixing them. So it's a completely different experience for me. And it was weird for a while because I there's no for me, there's no point in playing with people that you have to tell them exactly what they have to do.
Hmm.
Like, here's the parts, learn it, and that's what it is. I want I want it to be a real band where here's the song, do do what you will with it.
Yeah.
I
Like you
want
want
I
everybody
want
to bring their own gifts to it.
absolutely, bring your own personality and your musicality to it. And it was weird at first because, I'm used to being the boss of me, and I could kind of play whatever bass lines I want. I can write drum parts over I want, you know, where all of a sudden it's not, it's just a different thing. I think the record's going to be, I know it's going to be great. We did a video for it, which well, the record's not ready to go yet. We're still working on cover art, logos, all that crap. But it'll be cool, I think we're only going to do 5 or 6 songs because the album format, as much as the last 2 records, I think needed to be what they were for various reasons. It's more of a singles world now
It
where,
really is.
where people stream it, a few people will buy it, blah, blah, blah. And, you need to have content to be not relevant is not the right word, but you need consistent content for, let's say, a whole record where you put out the first single, 6 weeks later, you put another song out and you keep going.
Mhm.
And then in the interim, while that's playing out, you're recording the next thing. So that just keeps going. So it's this constant, photos, music, videos, whatever you can cobble together to do,
Mhm.
to have content to keep people interested, hopefully. So it's a bit of a different approach to this thing, and I probably could have done more with uh, Beautiful Decline, but it took three years to write it, and almost another year to get it pressed. On Cursed Blessings Records out of Toronto, and so the wait time till it came out and everything else, and then we did the videos. There's a bunch of bullshit involved in all of that, but regardless, I had already kind of moved on with, because Brian, Brian Irving, our drummer, played on all of Beautiful Decline. He played all the drums.
Yes.
So me and him kept going, and now we have this fucking killer band. So that became more of a focus than trying to keep Beautiful Decline in the public consciousness, for lack of a better word.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about Runout Groove Records. How did you become one of the owners of that record shop?
It's basically a sweat equity deal. I helped build all the cabinets and painted the store, and which I was, because they're friends of ours. Ellen, her and Jeff are the real owners. Paul has been friends with Ellen for decades and decades. So that's the connection. I just offered to help out, and just because I think it's an amazing thing that growing up, going to record stores was the greatest thing. I'd hop on the bus when it was like 10 cents, go downtown, and buy records and bring them home on the bus, open up the thing, read everything, not even knowing what the music was a lot of times, or what it was going to be like. But when I got home, I knew a lot about the record. And that's, in this day and age, to open up a record store that, which was a dying breed for a long time because records were not available and it was all CDs, etc. I just offered my time and did whatever was needed to help out, and then they turned around and gave me a percentage of the store, which, it's not huge or anything, but it's like, oh, okay. I guess I'm a part owner in a record store now. So it's great. We did the listening party. They do a lot of listening parties for new releases. Um, we'll probably do one when this new record comes out.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just a cool hang. They're like super great people, and super knowledgeable about vinyl and records, and there's books, there's t-shirts, and it's just a cool place to hang, and you meet people. I've worked a bunch of the record store day gigs and stuff, and I'll probably be doing the next one in May, I think.
I've been there. It's a great store. And
Yeah, you were at, with that artist, that woman.
Jill Emery, she used to be the bass
Yes,
player for Hole.
right, right. Um, yeah, it's just just a cool thing to be a part of, whether I'm an owner of it or a part owner of it or not. It's just fucking, it's awesome. Love it.
Yeah, and you guys actually made the news recently. Billy Joe Armstrong wound up crashing a listening party for Green Day's record.
Yeah, I guess they were shooting a video or something, and they decided to go to, I guess there was a few of them in LA. I'm not really sure, but they ended up going, probably because they were close by, I'm guessing. I don't know. And they showed up, and yeah, I wasn't at that. I don't know if I was in town or something, but yeah, it was it was a big thing for the store for sure. To I mean, and you've been there. If you have 25 people in that store, it's pretty full.
Yeah. Yep.
So it would, yeah. So I wish I had been there. Actually, it would have been great.
Me too. It looked really cool. And I hope it continues to do well. Actually, I love that entire area, and there's another record store nearby there that's really great too. Have you ever been to Atomic Records?
I have years ago. I prefer our store, but
Why?
yeah, they've been there a long time. It's, I think, a different kind of record. I mean, it's a record store for sure, and it's much bigger and stuff. It's a different kind of vibe, I think. Um, but you know, I think I've actually bought records from Atomic at one point. I tend to not really listen to a lot of music these days, but um, I have been buying a lot of vinyl lately. Not tons, but we have a record player again and stuff, and it's the experience of putting on an album or a 45 is such a, you know takes me back to when I was a kid listening, buying music and stuff, where CDs were great, I guess. um they're cheap to produce, which is great for independent artists.
Mhm. But
But
there's something about vinyl that's special, you know?
well, the medium, instead of, I don't know, however big a CD is, the artwork doesn't stand out because it's so small. If there's a booklet or any kind of writing on it, it's really hard to read because the typeface or whatever it's called is so small.
Mhm.
Whereas an album, you pull it out, you can read. I don't know. It's just a different thing. Um, that said, I mean, CDs are great too. I'm obviously old school in that. Even now, even though I realize streaming is like the biggest portion of music these in as far as people hearing stuff,
Mhm.
I still need to have a physical copy of everything I do,
Yeah.
whether it's just a CD or and the last record was actually an album. Uh, to me, it's not real if it's just kind of out there streaming. It doesn't really feel like holding something you've created in your hand, you know.
Exactly.
But I get the that most people listen either on their phones with earbuds or whatever, you know. I understand that. And I listen to stuff. I don't do Spotify or anything like that. I'll just go on YouTube and look for stuff or whatever. But yeah, for me, there has to be a physical product or of some kind, whether or not it sells or not, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's who you are as an artist.
Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, to me, that's the, you know, for lack of a better term, the prize for putting in that time, effort, money, that you actually have something you can hold in your hands versus, yeah, it's streaming somewhere, blah, blah, blah. To me, you know, I get it. It's cool. It's another outlet and it's what most people prefer, but you know, getting paid like, and it's not about the money, it's just more about the concept of it for me. It's getting paid 1,000th of a cent every time someone listens to your song. It's like, you know, it's almost nowadays like music is kind of what they call a loss leader, where you give away that for free in order to get them to buy t-shirts, hats, which is one of the only revenue streams left for bands, is the
Yeah.
market part of it.
Yeah. And it really sucks that it's like that. I know that there's a bill it, in place right now that would actually give artists a lot more money for streaming, but it needs to gain enough congressional support to actually become law. So we'll see. I mean, I hope that people start to get paid more for streaming, but you
Well,
know,
it's a tough road because the record companies, not for my stuff, but you know, just for shits and giggles, like Tom Petty, the record company gets a lot of the money that they get from streaming and all that stuff.
yeah.
They're not going to want to pay the artists more because it'll come out of their end.
Of course
And
not. And I mean, and you know, they've used that kind of attitude with other things besides streaming too. But at the same time, if we have laws in place that actually require that artists be paid for those streams, then
it,
that's part of the problem solved right there. I
well,
mean,
it's they're you know they're I read this interview or watched this interview with this guy Devin Townsend, who is kind of like I don't know, he's an incredible guitar player, singer, writer, and he does really well or has done really well in Europe and stuff like that. The interview I saw was like, I can't afford to take a band with me anymore. So I'm going to play the backing tracks, etc., etc. And
huh,
it's like, how shitty is that? But you know, gas. You know, I paid $5.16 for a gallon of gas this morning. You know, hotel rooms are $200 plus a room. Everything has gone up so much that I understand. Like, you know, as much as musicians love to play live, or most of them, to do it losing money is kind of pointless. You know,
yeah, yeah,
it's sure you love it and you want to do it, but if you can't come home, like I'm not talking about me necessarily, but artists that are have done well and stuff like that, you know. Well, there's artists like Aerosmith and stuff who said, what's the point of recording new records? No one's gonna buy them. You know, it's like,
and
right, you're gonna spend 100,000 or whatever you're gonna spend, and you won't you know, you're just throwing money. You know, that's the artist versus the business side of it, I guess, you know.
yeah, and it really sucks that for financially successful musicians and musicians who are struggling to be put in that position um, in various ways. But I mean, again, I think the way to change that is just to make laws that require that musicians be paid a certain amount
But
for performances and for
absolutely. I
streaming.
mean, you know, in Canada, there's programs, financial programs where you can get grants to tour, to do videos, to do records, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. And in Finland, the same thing. Michael Monroe, the former lead singer of Hanoi Rocks, he resides in Finland, and when he tours, the Finnish government actually pays for him to have a tour bus.
Yeah. Not so much in the US, but yes.
What hopes and goals and dreams do you have for the future?
Wow. Well, at my age, waking up tomorrow is always hard. Um, Hopes and dreams. I don't really have, I mean, defined dreams, I suppose. Um, Fucking keep doing what I'm doing, be the best human being I can, and best father, husband, friend, bandmate,
Mm.
I can be. And, you know, I mean, I hope this record gets heard by people, I guess. I mean, we're
Mhm.
going to do everything we can to ensure that, whether it happens or not, we're, in the music sense, it's like, just keep doing shit, It's like, what else am I going to do?
Excellent.
What I am, it's who I am. Yeah, and I wish it would stop raining so much in the winter in LA now.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially
and
here in North Hollywood where it floods.
like, yeah, it's doesn't have to rain much for the rivers to start on the roads and shit. Which
Exactly.
is, we're just not built for that kind of fucking weather here, obviously. Um, just try, be healthy. That is what it is. But no, just I'm actually, really enjoying. There has been many periods of my life where I was just existing for one reason or another. Now I love fucking listening to the birds at 6 in the morning. Taking the dogs. Just it's my life is not complicated, and that's I have so much gratitude that most of most of what the chaos that I wrought on my own life for so many years is kind of, you know it still exists, but it's not insurmountable, or it's not really getting in the way of anything. And just to hopefully live another fucking 20 years or 10 or whatever, and just keep keep helping people, you know help people record, mix, whatever they want. Just to be a good person. That's about it. There'd probably be many who would argue that fact, but everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Well, I think you seem like a wonderful man.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great. It was really awesome.